Good morning, and thank you for being with us here on a Saturday morning. I know that I want to begin by thanking Director Michelle and his team at MEMA, as well as General Boyles and his team with the National Guard. We had a briefing earlier today regarding the fact that we have two tropical storms in or headed towards the Gulf of Mexico. Tropical Storm Laura and Tropical Storm Marco. This should surprise no one in the press particularly, but no one in this room today, that since 1869, this has happened happened 10 times since 1869, that two storms are anticipated to hit the United States of America within a 1-week period. The latest time that occurred was in September of 2002, and before that it occurred in 1959, and before that it occurred in 1933. So prior to 1933 it occurred 7 times. We are monitoring very closely both Tropical Storm Marco and Tropical Storm Laura. Tropical Storm Marco, we are likely to start seeing some effects from that storm, tropical storm winds perhaps as early as late tomorrow. But we also expect that Tropical Storm Marco, based upon the current analysis, is more likely to go to our west and more likely to hit the state of Texas. We also know about Tropical Storm Marco that it is not likely at this point to reach hurricane status. It is likely to stay a tropical storm. But we also know that we are very early in this process. Both of these storms have a number of land masses that they have to likely go over, and we know that that brings significant lack of predictability. And so we have a lot to learn about these storms over the next 2 or 3 days before we know for sure exactly what's going to occur. But at this point, we think we will get some effects from Tropical Storm Marco, but that it is likely to enter the U.S. Somewhere on the Texas border. However, even if it does that and it goes on its current expected path, South Mississippi will get tropical storm level winds, and so we need to be prepared for that. The other tropical storm that is slightly behind Marco at this time is Tropical Storm Laura. We do believe at this time that it is likely to hit the state of Louisiana. However, we know that that would put us on the eastern front of that particular storm, and we know that the eastern front tends to be the area that gets the most difficult time of any tropical storm, or in the case of Laura, it is anticipated that it is very possible that it can strengthen over the next several days and become at a minimum a level 1 hurricane. And we know that once it gets into the Gulf, it can go very fast, it could go very slow, and it could gain significant strength, and we need to be prepared for that. This morning, I signed an emergency declaration so as to get things put in motion for our preparation. The reason I wanted to have a press briefing today is I wanted to remind our friends throughout Mississippi, and particularly our friends on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, that we are in unprecedented times. We are dealing with not only 2 potential storms in the Gulf of Mexico in the next few hours, we are also dealing with COVID-19. Because of COVID-19, our shelter space is limited compared to how it normally would be. What that means to you is, should you need to get out, should you need to move north, or perhaps east or even potentially west, depending on the storm, you need to make plans early to do so. What we cannot have happen is, if this thing is to strengthen on Sunday or Monday, to have a mad rush of people into our sheltering space. Because of COVID-19, we are trying very, very hard to maintain social distancing, the requirement of masks, and other things. And so we don't know if the evacuations are going to be necessary at this time. We do not know if they're going to be mandatory at this time. We will monitor over the next several days, but we do want to put you on alert that should you need to evacuate, that we're going to need to do so earlier than normal, because we're not going to have the shelter space, just simply based upon the fact that our total sheltering space will be reduced by approximately half to two-thirds because of COVID-19. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Director Michelle, who will give you some updates as well, and then we'll turn it over to General Bowles. I'm confident that both the team at MEMA and the team at the National Guard is prepared. We have been through this before. We will rise to the occasion as we always do. So with that, I'll turn it over to Director Michelle.
Thank you, Governor Reeves. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. My time seems to run together these days. Just want to give you an update on the state's level of preparedness as we get ready and continue to monitor these storms. Pretty much what we know for certain right now is uncertainty. If you've been tracking the weather and listening to all the weather, they're telling you that these storms, as they get out into the Gulf of Mexico and get into those warm waters, even though we have a better level of confidence of where these storm tracks are going, it's anybody's guess once these storms start swimming in the Gulf of Mexico in those warm waters. As the governor's already mentioned to you, Tropical Storm Laura is the one that we are most focused on at this time. Yesterday, we conducted phone calls or coordinating calls with the lower 24 counties in District 7, 8, and 9 as a matter of preparedness. We identified no unmet needs with those counties, and all the counties have done exactly what they should do and postured in the way that they should be at this particular time. We have spoken with, I've spoken with my counterpart in Alabama several times today and yesterday. The deputy has spoken with his counterpart in the state of Florida. We are looking to go ahead and, as an anticipatory measure, get some resources from Florida to assist us with non-congregate sheltering plans. As the governor spoke of emphatically earlier about sheltering. Sheltering has been one of the biggest topic of conversations this year along the entire coastal states and how we're going to run shelter operations. I want to reiterate the same thing that we've been talking about since the beginning of hurricane, when we started talking about hurricane preparedness. You need to avoid a congregate shelter during this COVID pandemic as much as you can. Shelters will be made available to those that need shelters, but I want to reiterate, avoid those shelters if at all possible. We have done everything that we possibly can to ensure that Mississippians have what they need when they need it with regard to shelter space. The state of Florida is going to be working with us and helping us through setting up a non-congregate opportunity for those that might need to go to a non-congregate shelter situation, particularly if you don't have the means to do that. Also, the key here is to plan now, plan early. It's the reason why we've been talking about this, and thank you to Governor Reeves for issuing a state of emergency. That does allow us to start doing some things, but the main thing is to let you know that this is important, that you watch the weather and make preparations right now. These storms could turn into be nothing more than a lot of wind, a lot of rain, but they could also turn into a Category 5 hurricane very quickly. So you need to be prepared for whatever may come our way. We'll continue to monitor this situation throughout the weekend. We anticipate that the track will certainly tighten up over the next 2 days and anticipate the effects of these storms starting sometime on Monday, and landfall is projected right now to be sometime Wednesday afternoon. So stay focused and pay attention as we get ready and watch these storms on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Michelle. And at this time, I'd like to ask General Bowles to speak to the Guard's preparedness and readiness.
Thank you, Governor. I briefed the Governor this morning that the Mississippi National Guard has not only been preparing for this storm, but we've really been preparing for the month of September. And during the month of August, we've been getting all of our logistics assets in place for response. We've alerted our units to the point of they're prepared to respond if necessary. We always want to be poised to support those local EOCs with engineer and military police assets, and then we always want to be prepared to go in a larger force if needed to provide for freedom of movement with our engineering assets along the coast and to help with security operations for local law enforcement. So, Governor, we're ready to respond if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, General Boyles. We know that here in Mississippi we have the best emergency management personnel in all of the world. That is true here at our EOC in Rankin County. It is also true in all of our EOCs along the Mississippi Gulf Coast and throughout our state. We're proud of our emergency management team, and we are prepared, and we will be ready for whatever these two storms bring us. I think back to my second full year in office. We know that 1 week from today will be the 15th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina hitting the state of Mississippi. And I can tell you with certainty, 7 days out, we had no idea the size and the severity of the storm that was about to hit us. That is why I stand before you today 5 days before expected landfall of Tropical Storm Laura, that could become Hurricane Laura, and warn everyone, start preparing now. We don't panic, but we do prepare. And as is always the case in these things, we prepare for the worst, we pray for the best, and we expect somewhere in between. And so with that, I'm going to open the floor to questions. Yes, sir.
Yes, Governor, or for Director Michelle, whenever it comes to shelters, you're saying that you want people to try to avoid shelters if possible. Governor, you mentioned something about keeping capacity low. Will people be turned away from shelters if capacity is high?
People will not be turned away from shelters, but we do want to encourage everyone who can to either, should it become necessary, to leave early. If not, if you can shelter in place, please do so. If you're not in a high-risk area, we also believe that those who are in high-risk areas need to self-evacuate if told to do so, and try to stay with friends or family or in hotels outside the primary risk areas. I will also tell you, and this is, I think, critically important, I want everyone to be aware that because of our space limitations in our shelters due to COVID-19, some shelters may not allow pets. So please make arrangements for your pets as well. That's something that we want to be sure that we point out today. Yes, ma'am?
Good morning, Governor. I wanted to ask, any concern from your office about the two storms, Marco and Laura, colliding at all and becoming essentially a super hurricane?
Well, we certainly have concerns that could occur. It seems like a relatively low likelihood at this time. However, the fact that there are two storms that are this close increases the variability of potential outcomes. And so that is one of the reasons that we are taking such extreme precautions right now. If we had one tropical storm out in the Gulf that was not expected to rise to the level of a hurricane, perhaps we'd be taking different measures today. But given the fact that we do have two different storms out there, both Tropical Storm Laura and Tropical Storm Marco, it increases significantly the variability of potential outcomes, and that's why we've got to be prepared for the absolute worst case scenario.
Governor, thank you very much. This question would be for you or for Director Michelle. Since you have already issued a national emergency, is this effective for coast harbors? And to ask if to the boats that are sitting in the harbors, if it's mandatory for them to evacuate the boats. That question is it.
Sure. I'm going to let Director Michelle address that.
Hey, Hunter, good morning. Thank you for the question. No, the state of emergency does not at this point in time mandate that those boats move out of the harbor. What the state of emergency will do is allow those counties to issue their own local proclamations, and they will make determinations at this point as to when or if at all that they need to start moving boats, and that'll follow suit with any type of evacuation orders that might come about as well.
Hunter, I do want to point out that regardless of the directions that either one of these storms take, the probability of storm surge is very, very, very high. And so we don't know exactly what that will look like at this time, but whether the storms move to the west or move to the east, more likely to the west than the east, but regardless, we will anticipate that we will have some storm surge. And so those who have boats in the harbor just need to be aware of that. At this time, we don't know how much that's going to be. We do anticipate that particularly our coastal regions will get somewhere between 3 to 5 inches of rain early next week, probably starting fairly soon, perhaps as early as tomorrow afternoon, but maybe not until Monday. But we do expect that we will get 3 to 5 inches of rain primarily in those 6 coastal counties. But we're going to see rain throughout the early to middle part of next week throughout the south part of our state. Yes, sir.
Other than shelters, are there any other resources that could be strained given the threat and the pandemic?
Well, one of the good news stories is, although we've had a uptick in coronavirus cases, and therefore we have obviously been very engaged in delivering PPE to our Tier 1 facilities. We do have a stockpile of PPE, so we don't. It's not as big as we'd like for it to be. It's not as big as it would have been had we not seen an uptick in cases throughout the summer. But we do have a stockpile of cases. Our team here, our acquisitions team at MEMA has done a good job making sure that we have that. So we will have PPE available for those in shelters. I was briefed earlier today, and at this time, again, as you know, these hurricanes are state managed, locally executed, and federally supported. And so we do not have any unmet needs at this time, I am told, from our local emergency managers. If in fact there are unmet needs, and we are obviously pre-positioning assets, as we often do at Camp Shelby, we're pre-positioning the potential for search and rescue so as to be prepared if the need arises. But at this time, there are no unmet needs that we are aware of.
Hunter Dawkins with a follow-up. Hunter, can you unmute yourself?
To the state learning new lessons from Cristobal that will help prepare us for this round of tropical weather, specifically when it comes to shelters and COVID-19?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. And yes, we learn from every storm. Obviously, one of the biggest takeaways from Cristobal, in my view, is the fact that both the storm surge and the winds were much greater than the vast majority of my friends along the Mississippi Gulf Coast anticipated. And so one of the things that we need to learn from Cristobal is we can make projections and we can make predictions, and we always do. And we have a tremendous team at the National Weather Service. We spoke with Felicia earlier this morning with the National Weather Service. She does a great job, and their entire team does. But at the end of the day, they're just projections, and they're just predictions. And things can be a lot worse than even we anticipate. And I think Cristobal certainly, the tide, the time at which it came in rose very quickly. And so I think the biggest lesson that we learned from Cristobal is we should always expect the unexpected when dealing with tropical storms and potential hurricanes. Yes, sir.
When it comes to the state's hospitals, we're still at high hospitalization rates. We've been taken down a little bit, but we still remain high. Are you concerned about the medical field response to if there is a bad storm in their areas?
Well, we're always making plans with respect to that. We saw, hold on just a sec. We saw hospitalizations if you look at both confirmed and suspected COVID cases, reach almost 1,250 about 3 weeks ago. Those total numbers ticked below 1,000 yesterday for the first time in almost 2 months. And so we're down almost 25% from the peak. Our total number of patients in ICU beds were at 339 3 weeks ago. They have fallen to about 260 over the last 3 weeks. Again, they are at levels higher than we want them to be, and they are at levels higher than they were through March and April. But I have full confidence in our healthcare system that we can handle any major damage and major catastrophe that comes before us. We've got obviously great facilities in Gulfport Memorial, as well as Singing River in Harrison and Jackson counties, as well as the Hancock facility. And so I'm confident and they all three have great leaders, and so I'm confident that we will be prepared for anything that comes our way.
WLOX has a follow-up.
Do you have a breakdown of how many shelters are in the lower 3 counties and the max amount of people that are allowed in each of those shelters?
I will get Director Michelle to try to answer that. He may know the specifics. He may not. We may have to get them for you.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, so let me start with your last question first. So the CDC guidance right now is going to limit capacity of shelters that we would normally see outside of COVID by some 50 to 60%. So that means less people going in shelters, which means you need more shelters in a given situation. Harrison County, spoke with Harrison County Director last night. He has activated his plan for shelters. He is not concerned about having an adequate number of shelters. It just means that he's going to have to go into and open up more shelters than he normally would. And he bases that on, as well as all the emergency management directors do, they base that on, and the Red Cross also, who has been the predominant supporter of our shelters down there, have numbers about what we can anticipate. So I don't have the exact number of shelters that are available with me right now in those lower 3 counties. I will tell you that there are adequate number of shelters in those lower 3 counties if we were to have to put everybody into shelters. The problem becomes in the resourcing and the ability to maintain all of the standards that CDC requires and still be able to accommodate everyone that comes in. The question that was asked earlier, will anybody be turned away from a shelter? Absolutely not. But again, I must say, only use a congregate shelter if you don't have any other means available to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. Governor, please explain for us, what does it mean for the state the state to coordinate with neighboring states in the wake of COVID in hurricane season? What does it mean to coordinate?
Well, I've talked about this a lot. I've been asked repeatedly the difference between dealing with COVID-19 as an emergency and dealing with, for instance, Hurricane Katrina back 15 years ago, a week from today. And the major difference is during Hurricane Katrina, it really hit the state of Mississippi and the state of Louisiana, and all other 48 states came in with assets and resources and wanted to help, and volunteers and just good Americans wanting to come and help their friends and their neighbors. And so COVID-19 has been very different than that, not because people didn't want to help, just simply because all 50 states are dealing with exceptional challenge, the likes of which we haven't seen since 1918. And so the fact is, as these storms appear to tick further and further to the west, or at least they have over the last 24 hours, that certainly frees up assets from some of our neighboring states. We have an incredible system in America to deal with natural disasters. And so there are a lot of resources and assets, for instance, in the state of Florida, wherein I feel confident they already have started making some of them available should we need them. And I actually spoke with Governor DeSantis just a couple of days ago on several topics. And so we know that our friends and our neighbors will step up should we need them. We don't believe that will be necessary at this time in large quantities, but never forget that the first team of law enforcement on the ground on the Mississippi Gulf Coast after Katrina was actually from the state of Florida. And the reason for that, of course, is because our teams had to cut our way south from Hattiesburg, whereas they had the ability to come down I-10 and help. So the reality is that we've got a lot of people out there that want to be helpful should we need it. We have a great team here, and so the assets are out there, the resources are out there, and we know we have people in place that know where to find them if and when we need them.
Governor, I've heard from a few commercial fishermen about their vessels, and they expressed to me that NASA was denying them commercial safe harbor in the Pearl River portion of Mississippi. This was where the boats rode out Hurricane Katrina. My question to you is there anything you can do to make a change to that measure?
Well, Hunter, thank you for bringing that to my attention. This is the first I've heard of it. We will check into it. We will certainly check into it.
This is a question for Director Michelle. When it comes to the two storms that are coming into the Gulf, is there a higher chance that North Mississippi might be impacted as the two storms suck energy from central United States?
I've been waiting for an opportunity the last 3 days to say Fujiwara. So now you give me that opportunity. Yes, there's always an opportunity for it to affect the northern part of states. As you remember with Hurricane Katrina, every county in the state of Mississippi was affected, and it remained a Hurricane Force storm all the way from Lauderdale County. It got that far inland. So it could affect. Right now, with the way that the storm is projected, we didn't see any, even with rain bands, that were going to affect the northern part of the state. As of right now is going to be central. That 3 to 5 inches of rain would pretty much be isolated to the lower 3 coastal counties, and then as we move forward, as much as 2 to 4 inches, and then the northern part of the state right now. But all that would change. As these storms are working and competing against one another, this Fujiwara effect, the bigger storm will feed off the lower storm and could create a larger storm, but we don't know. We just don't know right now because the storms are just moving and so unpredictable. The closer they get together, the more unpredictable it would be on the total effects of the state, and a lot of it's going to depend on where that center, that eye track of that storm goes, as to far high or far north into the state of Mississippi that we could see storm effects.
Again, I want to thank everyone for being here today. You can rest assured that we will be monitoring these storms very, very closely in the hours and days ahead. We are going to, again, reiterate that the uncertainty, because there are two storms headed towards the Gulf, is pretty significant. Typically, we have a pretty good idea of what the cone's going to look like 2 to 3 days out. There is significant uncertainty because of the effects that Director Michelle just mentioned. And so we really want to put everyone in the state on alert. Certainly don't want to panic. We're not going to panic, and you don't need to panic. But if you're in the coastal region particularly, just be alert, pay attention. You've done this drill many times before. We've done this drill many times before. Again, I'll conclude by simply saying, we're going to plan for the worst, pray for the best, and expect somewhere in between. Also, I want to just mention to all of y'all, we still have a mask mandate in place. We still need to be maintaining social distancing as we are doing here at this press briefing, and I want you to do so as well. We've got to work together to continue to reduce the community transmission of the COVID-19 virus. We've made real progress the last 3 weeks. Now we've got to work even hard to make more progress. So thank y'all, and God bless.